Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here coming to you from Austin, Texas. It is the 27th of October, and we're going to do a follow-on to yesterday's video about the Israeli retaliatory strike on Iran, now that we know a little bit more about what was hit. The Israelis were able to target a number of military facilities. They didn't go after the nuclear program, and they did not go after oil facilities. Instead, their primary target were facilities that stored missiles and particularly were a critical component in the construction of the missiles that the Iranians like to use. There's two types of fuel that you can put in a ballistic missile. The first is liquid fuel. This is cheaper, this is technically easier, but it's really expensive and it's very dangerous because you can't store the rocket fuel in the rocket. So if you're not going to launch in the next couple of days, you generally leave them empty. And so it's easy to know when the bad guys are going to launch a bunch of missiles because you just need some satellite information to see all the trucks coming to pump in all of this somewhat toxic, very explosive, very dangerous fuel. Now, the Iranians have moved on from liquid fuel to solid fuel, which is much more stable. You can store the fuel in the rocket forever, but it's more technically involved, and the Iranians don't know how to do it themselves. So they have bought the facilities that make this stuff from China, and now those are pretty much all smoking holes in the ground after the Israeli raid. So until these things are built out again, and Iran is under much stricter sanctions now than it was when it bought all these things years ago, the Iranians are going to have a hard time running their missile fleets in the way that they have, which is clearly what the Israelis were after. They probably have one or two that are still operational, fuel fabrication facilities, but certainly not the type of scale that is a real threat to Israel. So, strike one, Iran. The second thing to keep in mind is that wherever the Israeli fighter bombers went, whether it was over Iraq or Lebanon or over Iran itself, they took out all the air defenses along the way, and most of the air defenses that the Iranians use are something called an S-300, which is the second from top of the line that the Russians produce and export, top of the line being the 400. Well, the Iranians knew this was coming, they had plenty of notice, and they still couldn't shoot down a single Israeli jet. And so between this raid and the war in Ukraine, where there's also a lot of S-300s in play, we have been getting a bit of an awakening for people who have bought Russian equipment all these years because they couldn't do jack. And all of those are now smoking holes in the ground. And if you play this onto a larger stage, the Israelis are now pretty confident that whenever they feel the need to establish air superiority, they don't even need jets to do it. They just have to take out the air defense because nobody in the region has air power anyway. But when I look at the broader strategic picture, the Russians do have some S-400s, but not enough to provide full coverage, and they've lost several of them in the Ukraine war already. So, yes, they're the most advanced that the Russians have, but they're not that much more advanced than the S-300. Far more importantly, the Chinese have their local air defense, the HQ-9 and the HQ-22, which, oversimplifying here, but they're basically the local knockoffs of the S-300 floor model. They've been upgraded Chinese style in a few ways, but we've never seen them actually in combat. And now we know the Israelis, who don't have a first-rate air force, were able to take out all of the S-300s they came into contact with, which means that the United States, which has, a better air force, probably would have no problem operating in that sort of environment in China should push come to shove. So surely this is not what the Iranians planned when they did that raid on the 1st of October, but they've given U.S. strategic thinkers a lot to chew on and indicating that air defense on the other side of the line might not be nearly as interesting or capable as we have long been concerned about. So, huzzah.